Hi, everybody. Welcome to Read Science, where my co-host Jeff and I love to speak with popular science book authors and talk to them about their books and how they do their craft. And when it comes to popular science book authors, no one is more popular than Mary Roach. And so we are so excited to have her back again today because she was our very first guest on Read Science. She helped us kick the whole thing off. So Mary, you want to say hi?
Hey, bye.
Hey, awesome. So Mary, as most of you who are tuning in know, is the author of 7 books, but I only have 6 here. The other one I read was from the library. So we've got a stack of books that are all interesting books that talk about the human body in some shape or form, but with a twist, with a sense of humor. And so most of you are familiar with Stiff, Spook, Bonk, Packing for Mars, Gulp, and her new one is called Grunt, The Curious Science of Humans at War, which I just loved. I haven't not loved any of your books, but I love this book because I'm an Air Force brat and I grew up in the with just the rest of the family in the military. My brother was a Marine and things like that. So, well, Mary, we're glad to have you again. And I think what we'll do is have Jeff start with a question.
Huh. I'm a National Guard brat, believe it or not. That's maybe not a terribly bratty thing, but we were on active duty for a year.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and that gives some background for dealing with a lot of military people, especially when I was almost of the age to go to various military academies. And got lots of offers for that. But anyway, Mary, it is a delight to have you back after 3 years. And
Thank you.
I'm happy that
I'm just a brat in general.
That's nice. And I got to finish the entire book this time, which pleased me very much.
Oh, A+ for you, Jeff.
Thank you. So just to prove it, for my first questions, I want to try to get a top-level view of a couple of big things that came to mind while I was reading. So I'm sort of starting at the end of the book, basically.
Sure.
Yeah. The first, I have a quotation, and I really enjoyed the sort of thoughtful respect, but still the fun scientific viewpoint of looking at dead bodies that you do so well. Way at the end of the book, you said in military autopsies, medical hardware is examined alongside the software of organs and flesh. Because of the program called Feedback to the Field, the work of these medical examiners does save lives, but not the ones that they interact with day to day. And I wanted to get more impressions and talk about that and use that as a pretext to discuss, talk about all the things that you're talking about in this book as a way to save military lives of troops.
I'm sorry, I missed the whole center section of this. It was frozen, so I got the beginning and the end, and then it froze. I heard the quotation. Yeah.
I'm just curious about that whole situation, and I want to start by talking about being in that morgue, seeing those autopsies, and understanding what the military is doing and how very much they're learning by doing those autopsies and examining, as you put it, the organs and the flesh, but also the medical hardware that came back with those bodies, and how important that is.
Sure, yeah. The program Feedback to the Field is, as the quote suggests, it's, first of all, there are autopsies that are done with all of the life-saving equipment in place, whether that's an artificial airway device or for a needle decompression, a tourniquet, that sort of thing. So those are left in place, and it's part of the autopsy, and the medical examiners are looking to see, did this equipment perform the way the manufacturer said it would? Was it placed correctly, and particularly with new equipment? And essentially, is there anything we could have done differently that might have saved this young person's life? And then
because some of this hardware is going to be things like armor and protective devices. Other is things that have been used in the field by medics to try to treat the problems, right?
Right. And the second part of this is there's a monthly teleconference, about 60, 70 individuals, some of them in Dover at the medical examiner's office, and some of them in Afghanistan and or Iraq, or wherever the action is. So there's this communication back and forth between the person who did the autopsy and the person who did the care for this specific body. So it's case by case. They take, I think, 5 or 6 deaths, and there's a conversation between the medical examiner about what he or she found, and then relating that information back to the caregivers in the field, whether they're Army medics, corpsmen, or people in hospitals. So it's this immediate information rather than waiting and publishing a paper that might come out 2 years down the line. There's a dialogue back and forth, which is a wonderful model. I would love, it's one of the most positive things I stumbled onto, in that it's bypassing a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of dead ends in getting information from the people who have it and are discovering it back to the people who can use it and make changes.
Well, Jeff, let me interject really quickly. Actually, that part of the book actually inspired me. I was like, wow, that is genius, because you had spent a large part of the book where people were role-playing as medics, and they're trying to get feedback of trying to be in this situation. But then I thought it was wonderful, despite the fact they have to use someone who's dead, unfortunately. But then they can give that feedback to them, real feedback, not the role play, not the whatever. I thought it was pretty fantastic.
One other observation around actual victims, and these were not military people who came, but corpses that had been donated for research and made their way in. There are a couple questions later on about those, but you talked about one of them where you're in a situation where they're looking at explosives and how to armor vehicles from explosives from below. But what you wrote about them was light and amusing, but also seemed so respectful and appreciative. When you said to feel no pain, to accept broken bones without care or consequence is a kind of superpower. And you say, the form-fitting lycra costumes, it occurs to me, are utterly appropriate. And I thought that was so nice to, and you've written the whole book in about the strange life of donated corpses.
Right.
But here they are again doing signal work to help keep other people alive, and that just seemed very touching to me.
Me too.
And, it seemed to strike you that way just from sort of the tone of voice that showed up in there. And so in the book, you end up in lots of places looking at things that have to do with explosives, air people who get dumped in the water and worry about sharks, people who need penis reconstructions, these morgues, just submarines, all sorts of places. And naturally, I was thinking as you were going, my goodness, how did you manage to get acceptance, invitations to visit these places? And at the very end, you said, well, an awful lot of people said yes.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear more about that. And if you have any secrets to getting people to say yes, of course, that would be
yes, that's useful. I love that. And I know you had a little section of the book where they were like, no, where your editor says, of course, you should talk to the Navy SEALs. So definitely tell us how you get people to say yes, and just let you on board and humor the journalist who's now wearing, trying to shoot a gun.
I think that was the oh shoot, where did I write it down? The blank puke. Shoot. When you were visiting the one place, I'll come up with it later. When I do, I'll just blur it.
The media. The media puke.
The media puke. That's it. Thank you.
the slang, media, yeah. You threw me with blank puke. Yeah, I'm a media puke. That's the military slang. Actually, the people in the Navy, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the Army, and everybody else that I talked to, the public affairs people included, were welcoming and straightforward, which I didn't expect. I didn't always get that with NASA when I worked on Packing for Mars. There seems to be a lot of suspicion with NASA that I was doing something different than what I said, but the people in the military public affairs office were. It was very straightforward. If it's classified, if anything is classified, the answer is right up front, no. Nothing you can do about it. Though I tried in the case of the Navy SEALs, my editor really wanted some more action with the Navy SEALs, and I thought maybe if I covered the guy who does the weather with the Navy SEALs, which is something people don't really expect, that the Navy SEALs, that the Special Operations Command has weather people, and that's an integral part of a mission. And I thought, well, I'll just be talking about the weather. How harmful? What's the problem? And they're like, no, this is so not going to happen. You are not going on any special operations mission. So anyway, but other than classified missions, it was mostly a matter of finding the person who had the authority to say yes. A lot of people. Nobody was saying no. People were very gracious. They said, this sounds fine with us, but we need to find the person who can say yes. And sometimes they were odd requests, like, well, I want to travel to Camp Lemonnier with this diarrhea researcher. And Camp Lemonnier, there's a lot of counterinsurgency work, and there's restricted areas. And so it was people trying to find the person. Is it AFRICOM? Is it CENTCOM? Is it the Office of the Secretary of Defense? Is it Chief of Naval Operations? Who's the person? They were just scratching their heads. So it was a lot of just emailing a lot of different people who were trying to figure out who that person might be. So it was just a matter of keeping at it and saying, thanks so much. Could you put me in touch with the person that you think might be the person? And sometimes that took 3 weeks, and sometimes it took 1.5 years.
But you even ended up on a submarine for a while.
Yeah.
Do you think your reputation preceded you, and maybe did that contribute to any trust? Although they're a helpful lot anyway, but
yes, it did, and I could see that going either way with me. And I always offer to send a previous book because I want them to see what I do. And I want them to see that there's good information, that I'm not doing some sort of muckraking investigative piece that's going to slam people. It's not at all like that. Then again, it's I'm a little bit of a unknown quantity in terms of how I'm going to write it and where the humor will fall. So I just want them to be comfortable with it. So I'm always sending the book out. But people usually, when somebody was willing to spend months helping me get the access that I needed, it was somebody who was familiar with a book, who's felt like it's a story that should be told. We do good work here, and we're proud of it, and we'd like you to come in and write about it. So, and that was a huge help. That was a huge help. So it was a case of my being lucky enough to stumble onto individuals who had read a book and who felt like spending the time to try to figure out who could first of all, who could approve it, and also in the case of the nuclear Trident submarine, when is there going to be a short-term voyage outing?
Yeah.
What's the word? There's a word underway. Anyway, because they go out for months at a time, and I wasn't looking to be out for months at a time. So I had to go out with some prospective commanding officers who were doing a practical exam for 5 days. So that worked out great. I was able to go when they went and come back when they came back. So but that was about a 1.5 years of
right.
just, every few weeks, hello, it's me again, hi. Just checking
Do we
in.
have
hello
more
again.
news? Yeah, do we
But
have more? I was thinking...
Yeah,
I was
go ahead.
thinking of when you were on the submarine, I couldn't help but think of Rose George on a ship for her book, 90% of everything. And I was like, Rose George has been a guest on our show, and I love her writing.
Yes.
But
She's fabulous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was like, I love when I see that. I was like, oh, Mary's on a submarine, and oh, Rose is on a ship, and it's just
It probably took Rose just about as long to get permission. I think sometimes commercial ventures are more wary about what will be said, possibility of liability, safety issues. So, I don't know how long that took her to get permission, but she did. That's such a good book. Yeah.
It is such a. I love her writing style. I have to say, like I just feel soothed. She's writing about tough issues, but I feel soothed when she's writing.
Yes.
I'm like, I don't know how she did it. I don't know if that's the British way, but whatever, I'll take it. And also, but speaking of soothing and respectful, like Jeff said, like all of your books have dealt with some touchy subjects that if you weren't diplomatic, if you weren't respectful, they could go horribly wrong. But none of your books have gone horribly wrong because you have the touch, right? And you deal with it with humor, but it's so respectful. And we can think of lots of people who do humor and it goes wrong and it's, terrible. But, this is something that makes you stand out tremendously. Is you can tackle some interesting topics without insulting people or offending people. I suppose you've offended a few people, but maybe not as overtly as others.
Yeah. Well, it's something I was very aware of with this book, the potential for a misstep in terms of the tone. So I tried to be cautious while at the same time being Mary Roach. I can't be somebody else. So it's good to hear you say that.
I didn't feel like you were being self-conscious and constantly correcting yourself. It just seemed to me that you had a positive attitude of reporting these things, which are amusing, but also, important stories. And it's nice to know that the people supported the idea because they felt proud of their work.
Yeah.
They're doing important things. They're trying to save the lives of troops, and this is something they can see contributing.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I had a lot of respect for it. I think without exception, everyone that I visited, spoke to in the book, came across as people just working hard and not always getting a lot of recognition for what they were doing.
I made a note along the way that I think I recognized a similar motivation between the things that interest you and that you look into and the things that I look into. And I think I wrote some note that said, I think you must ask yourself an awful lot of times, I wonder why that happens. Because I enjoyed so much, for instance, talking about sweating. Sweating is a big deal, and there's a whole chapter on sweating. Fine. And it's interesting to know, and that I don't think I had ever made the connection that sweat basically originates in blood plasma.
Yeah.
And it's like, so I'm reading in the footnote, it's like, this is where it comes from, all that water weight that people worry about and things. You may not want to be losing that, and this is why dehydration is so special. So there's an interesting new fact, but also, thank you, a fact that led me to realize many things. And I think those are the things you look for, because those are the things you keep putting in the footnotes.
Me too. That was exactly my reaction. It never occurred to me, where does this stuff come from? It seemed like just spontaneously generated water that would appear on your skin.
Yeah, like with water bags or something.
Yeah, exactly. And it never, I hadn't made the connection because I'd never bothered to think about it. And then I found that amazing 500-page book on perspiration. And I love when some scientists go so deeply into a topic that most people haven't given a moment's thought to. That's my kind of guy or gal.
My endocrinologists would say, nothing to eat or drink after midnight because you're going to be fasting and you have to give blood. And then after a while they change that to, you should drink water. Because otherwise they can't find the veins to draw the blood. Now I know that.
That's right, yeah. Yep, I know.
I'm sorry, I just was really turned on by this footnote.
Oh, it was really interesting to me, but for me it was more of a, oh yeah, that's right, of course it comes from plasma. Like, you know what I mean? Like I focus on like, oh, the sweat glands look like this and these are the cells and things like that. But I went, oh yeah, of course plasma's that. And you know how it competes. Cooling down, or your muscles need this, but your body needs to cool down. So we're going to shut down at some point if we're sweating too much.
Something's got to give. That's right, and that's when you start getting into trouble.
Where heat stroke comes from. Yeah.
It's exactly. Really interesting. So, okay, many years ago, I did a book review, and I remember I called you the David Sedaris of science because he's hilarious and he's so funny. But, it's really amusing. He wrote something for the New Yorker just recently, and he's shopping with his sisters in Tokyo. And he's shopping at a place that sells distressed clothing. So I want to read this little bit because it made me think of your book because I had read this just after I read your book. So he said, okay, everything looks as if it has been pulled from the evidence rack at a murder trial. I don't know how they do it. Most distressed clothing looks fake, but not theirs for some reason. Do they put it in a dryer with broken glass and rusty steak knives? Do they drag it behind a tank over a still smoldering battlefield? How do they get the cuts and stains so right? And I laughed about it because there were two things about your book that relate to this. One is, as Jeff mentioned, we made all these vehicles that are, protected on the sides and the top, but not the bottom. So the enemy's going, well, if we explode from the bottom, we're going to have some problems. So how do we protect our military personnel from these sorts of explosions? And the other is an entire chapter on clothing for the military, everything you think of. And if I, at that time I was thinking of going into the Navy to pay for college, knew that I could be a fashion designer for the Navy, it might have worked. Do you need to answer that?
No, I just hung it up. Whoever it was, just hung up. I'm going to take it. Let's take it off the hook.
Okay.
I get usually one call a week. They're all, you attract construction crews.
Yeah.
And also
phone calls, and I'm waiting for my neighbor to start mowing because he usually does.
Yeah. And I love that also that I was going to say, there is a machine that does that. At the Natick Labs, there's the laundrometer, which was the steel balls bouncing around with the fabric to beat it up more quickly, to see how much it can take.
Oh, to accelerate the wear and tear.
Right. Instead of putting it through 5 times, you put it through once through the laundrometer. Yeah. Let me see who this is. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No. Sorry, I'm doing a podcast. Oh.
Guests on air. Well, so you can talk about something interesting.
Oh.
Well,
it's
I'm
on Sunday,
it's not
5
an
to 7,
emergency.
But we have managed not to ask
All right.
just what this book is about.
Okay, I have to go. Bye. Sorry.
That's funny. I will take it as a compliment of my ability to attract interruptions. No problem. We've had dogs appear.
Yes. Oh, and there was another fun fact about clothes that flame-resistant textiles, some anyway, work via heat-released chemicals. Well, of course they do, but I never thought of that.
I had no idea.
So you choose that. I mean, I'm still amazed. You choose these facts because they explain things, not just because they're facts.
Oh, sorry, I've lost you.
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't hear that one.
I'm just marveling at how you choose facts that actually explain things rather than just sort of go, here's a fact, and it stops the conversation. They were everywhere. Well, anyway, that's...
I don't know if she hears. Can you hear us?
It's in and out. I didn't really get I got about half of that. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Wait,
That's okay.
Yeah. So if I will try and see if I can have it come through. So Jeff was saying it's amazing because you don't just list facts. You know, it goes beyond that. You're explaining some deeper science. Oh, she's frozen. She may not hear.
Yeah, it's frozen. She may not hear.
Okay, Google Plus, let's get on the ball here. Or
yeah, I have a fun game that might work with this. It's sort of like the rapid response round. I found that I kept writing down short phrases and things, and I can't really remember why.
Uh-huh.
So I thought I'd see what your reactions were. Like, oh, here's one. There are a lot of issues to solve in doing a penis transplant.
Did she hear?
I got penis transplant. Was there something after that?
No, just that there are a lot of issues around a penis transplant. It's a complicated, difficult, challenging, but useful thing that involves men's psyche and just stuff. It was a big issue. No, the actual transplant was the first time I was able to, even though I wrote stiff, I was never actually in an operating, a cadaver lab when the surgeons were doing the kind of working out the details before they did the first real transplant. They do kind of a wet run, as they put it. Yes.
They do a wet run. Using cadavers, and so that was amazing just to see. Like they were looking at, because they were trying to figure out which are the most important arteries and veins to hook up. So they had a bag of blue fluid that they would then attach to an artery, and it was like an IV bag, and then they would sort of artificially as though that blue fluid were blood, it would come into the artery, and then they could see, because the skin would turn blue, they would see what areas were perfused by that via that artery, and that would tell them this is an important artery to take. We'll need to reattach this one. So they were working out those details in the cadaver lab. So it's fascinating.
Or here, nearby probably, here's Christine Delorier saying the problem is getting the U.S. government to embrace sex. I don't really remember, but
she said, she's someone who's been trying to get funding for a staff sex therapist at Walter Reed, and not just for people who've had genital injuries, but let's say if you're an amputee and you've lost 2 limbs, what sexual positions work, and are there pieces of equipment that are helpful? And the answer is yes, there are resources and information, and there should be somebody who's just there and is made accessible for couples. And also think if you're on some of the drugs that these guys come back and they're on painkillers and antidepressants and nerve stabilizers, and these things can interfere with the sex life. So there's many reasons to have somebody, a professional, who just is there and someone can make an appointment with. And she's been trying to do that, but has not been successful.
But these are major quality of life issues, and it's awkward. Right. Fortunately, there are a few people who are advocates, but it's awkward that culturally it's so awkward.
Yes, right. It tends to be shunted aside as a lifestyle issue. It's important that they walk.
Like it's optional or something.
Right, but it's also, like this one andrologist said, it's important that they walk, and it's also important that they're able to have sex. And it's not something that should just be ignored because nobody wants to bring it up. So,
Well, so and they need to sort of think, would I like to not be having sex? Oh, you know what I mean? But they just don't put themselves in that situation.
Yep. Yeah, right.
Here's a phrase. continuing the lightning round. Why do you? I can't remember why you wrote liquid ass, but I wrote it down.
Oh, that was funny.
Yeah, liquid ass is well. There are these things called cut suits that enable medics and Navy corpsmen who do medical care for the Marines. They train on these cuts, so it's a wearable. It's like a wearable version of Processa Annie, the patient simulator. So
worn by the people who are the actors.
Yes,
playing
worn by the person
people.
who's playing a wounded person. So it's this cut suit. It has organs, and not only does it have organs, but inside the intestines, if you have an evisceration, say, or a knife wound, and the intestine is open, there's even this substance that you can create intestinal contents, that is to say shit, and you can give it a smell using what is ordinarily a party novelty called liquid ass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's how liquid ass ended up in the book.
But that was a big part of things, because someplace back here, it's like a big topic I thought to talk about was trying to invent the world's most noxious smell.
Yes.
And what do we have? Where? Malodorant. It's like, how often do I see that word? Not very often. And I enjoyed the fact that stench soup was a recipe that began with, quote, U.S. government standard bathroom malodor. Who knew that we had a U.S. government standard bathroom malodor, which apparently is like the leading contender around the world for the world's worst smell.
It is yes, in any culture that you go to, any race, any culture, any ethnicity, that is the one that everybody agrees is horrible, revolting, and scary.
Scary.
And scary. Like it is not like anything in nature. It is something that makes people uncomfortable. And it is something. It was developed as a compound, a standardized compound for testing latrine deodorants.
Right.
In World War II. I believe it was World War II. So they were looking for, if you're going to have a latrine deodorant, this is what it has to combat. So, and it's beyond porta potty. It's supposed to mimic an open pit field latrine that hundreds of men have been using in 80-degree weather for a few days. So,
but
it's pretty bad.
Surprising thing in that discussion of odors is how much our reaction to an odor depends on the context in which we smell it. And the shocking results of things that we believe are there, that they were created to mimic these horrible malodorous things that 69% of people said, "Oh yes, I would have this as a snack."
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think 3% of Caucasians would wear vomit as a scent. Like oh yeah, a little bit right here. Yeah. I like that. I'd wear that as a perfume.
Well, it's fun fact, but it's telling, and it's oh my goodness.
So I'm curious, what did not make it into the book?
Yeah, a lot of things, because I had planned to embed in Afghanistan, and there were a number of things I would have liked to cover. Medical evacuation care in the air. Would have liked to be on one of those flying medical helicopters.
Mm-hmm. Medevac.
Medevac, or the Army blood system would have been really interesting. I wanted to specifically embed with the chaplains corps, who go out with units. The chaplain and the chaplain's assistant. Only one of them is armed. The chaplain's assistant covers the chaplain. The chaplain is not armed. But they went with a unit. Whatever the unit is doing, they're there. Whether it's route clearance or going into a village, and whatever it is their unit is doing, they are on the scene, which gives them a unique ability, I think, to empathize and to be somebody that the troops could relate to, perhaps. So that was interesting to me. I would like to do that, but ISAF, the coalition group, was only accepting daily journalism embeds at that point, because it was during the drawdown. So all of that, I would have liked to cover all of that. And of course, the special operations mission that my editor so dearly wanted, the Navy SEALs mission that was classified.
Yes,
So.
I forgot. That wasn't in the book, I don't think. I think it was in your trailer.
Yes,
your
that's
trailer.
correct. That's right.
I heard about it. So,
yeah, yeah.
So here's a funny tidbit. Speaking of Medevac, my father in the Air Force, and he joined right out. Well, he didn't even finish high school, so he joined. And they give him all these aptitude tests, and he's a great mechanic. And they said, "You're a great mechanic, but you're going to be hospital administration." And then he actually ended up later when we were living in Guam. Like, he had served his enough tours as the hospital administrator. So they said, well, if you want to stay longer, if you want to extend the stay in Guam, so your kids can finish high school or whatever, you will be in charge of Medevac. So he did that for a number of years. And then, from what I understand, when I was a baby and before my sister was born, he was in Vietnam. And apparently he drove ambulances and did hospital paperwork. But he would never talk about it. So we never were regaled with stories of the Vietnam War. So the only thing I ever heard him say was, "I like watching MASH because it does remind me of some of the fun times, the rare fun times we would have." You know. So
pretty intense.
Yeah,
pretty
I think
intense.
so. I think so. So if something serious had broken out, they would have gotten you out of any of these situations quickly, right? If the submarine said, "Yeah, sorry, we got to go to the Persian Gulf,"
exactly.
They get you out of there, right?
Yeah, well, it was a ballistic missile sub, so it was, I think it's basically a roving nuclear arsenal. They were, they're not really. I mean, I don't think they would have.
I suspect if that kind of emergency came along on that submarine, you'd go along for the ride.
I think they'd make her leave. Uh-oh, she froze.
They may not have the time if, global nuclear warfare is imminent.
Yeah, well, that's true.
It's like, we'll get back to you as soon as we launch a couple of these missiles.
Yeah.
Stay there in your room. Don't come out. So you froze for a moment, but you're back. That's good.
Yeah, it's one of those days. Okay, another thing from the rapid gross out round. So we learned that live blowfly larvae were approved by the FDA in 2007 as a, quote, medical device. And with delight, I wanted to ask you, was my question, how much delight did you get from being able to write a footnote like Medicare reimbursement code for maggots CPT 99070?
Pretty much off the charts.
And yet, blowfly larvae do very important work that can't really be done by anything else. And so it's another one of those unsung hero things with simultaneous gross out, which is a good thing, right?
Right. Though she's frozen again. So
Yes.
I did find, I had read some articles about maggots as, debriding.
Medical devices?
Medical devices. So I found that to be very, very interesting. So to read it in her book. And so really, what was the favorite part of your book while we wait for Mary to return?
I enjoyed all of these little discoveries, like I said, of facts that led me to think of other things and to realize things. And so I was really excited about the observation about water. I was excited by things like discovering that, no, indeed, the blood vessels in our head do not dilate, so it is not true that we lose 90% of our body heat through our heads.
Yeah, it's so much good information. Oh, Mary's going to have to call back.
Yeah, she'll be back.
She'll call back.
But in the end, and I think she must have done this because she saved it for the end, I liked the chapter particularly on the cadavers from the field soldiers, troops who had died, who didn't make it back, and the respectful but telling way that she talked about their contributions and how they're still helping their compatriots even after they've lost that battle.
Right. Yeah. I like, well, how her book, cycles back around to both stiff and bonk,
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I think we're beginning to see themes that attract Mary's interest. And so,
definitely.
if we had her here, we could just talk about her. But if we had her here, we might say, do you involve dead bodies in all of her things?
Well, yeah, I guess you have to when you want to, talk about the human body. At some point, you look at the dead.
Yeah.
That's the thing about biology, is I tell people, it's like, if you want to be a biologist, at some point you have to come face to face and be comfortable with death, because that's just part of the cycle. And so it makes perfect sense that her books do that.
Which was why I became a physicist instead. But you mentioned earlier the problem with these under vehicle bombs and things, and it's a recent problem. And so the Army was investigating how to armor their vehicles to protect people, and they needed measurements because that's the way things are done. And so they were simulating explosions that happened beneath the seats of troops who are riding in these vehicles, and caused the seats to basically mash them against the top of the vehicle, which caused all sorts of trauma that had never been studied before, because that hadn't been what any of the crash dummies did and what anything was designed for. And so they were investigating these with bodies donated for research, we might say. And I thought another telling thing about people's reactions and squeamishness and such, that there is now a new Pentagon protocol after some top brass saw one of these demonstrations and was so squicked by it that they implemented a new protocol. Anybody that wants to contribute their body to this sort of research must explicitly authorize the use of their body for these explosive tests.
Right. Yes. Hence, lest the family should discover that, oh my goodness,
And it seemed to me a bit of an overreaction for people who had already decided that they would make this donation. I mean, that's a bit of a barrier. Threshold for people to get over anyway. But I don't know, that told us more about some of the culture at the Pentagon and about our culture at large, I think. And another big cultural point came up with this a fair amount of searching for shark repellent.
Yeah, that was a surprising chapter in the book.
Because aviators are concerned, and there are a lot of things to be concerned about, but are be concerned about being shot down over the ocean. And one of their big fears was shark attack. And they did all this research looking for shark repellents and learned a lot about what sharks can smell, what does or does not repel them, what works when you're in the water to attract them or not attract them. It's rather little. They're not all that interested in people, apparently. And I really liked the idea that in the end, what they did was distribute a pamphlet that they wrote called Shark Facts. That said, your chances of having a shark encounter are so small, you should worry about things like hypothermia instead.
That's a good point.
Shark Sense, and now I have to go to the internet someplace and look for a copy of Shark Sense. And
I think this would make a good TV program for Shark Week. How the military had to deal with the fear of sharks in their personnel. So I'm actually here putting a little. She's back.
Yes. We were talking about Shark Sense and people who have to sign papers for their bodies if they're going to contribute to explosives research because some top brass were a little squicked. And I think this tells us an awful lot about American culture and what concerns aviators who worry about crashing into the ocean. I don't know.
Uh-oh. Oh, she's a little
Right.
slowed down. There you are.
Yeah, I got part of that. I wasn't sure if we're talking about shark repellents or cadaver tests.
Yes.
They both were in there, and then it went frozen.
We talked about all those and what it reveals about people and their obsessions and their secret fears.
Yes.
Yes.
So, okay, so I'll ask a question that maybe you've been asked a million times. What surprised you the most doing this book?
Oh, well, let's go back to the previous question.
Go ahead.
Because I think that's an interesting one. Everything surprised me. I can't name one thing. Really. Everything in the whole book was surprising to me because I don't know anything. I didn't know anything about any of it. So, but yeah, I think there was an interesting irony that talking about there was the cadavers being used to for trying to develop a crash test dummy for underbody blast. Those, this is the only real way to make the information from a crash test dummy or mannequin meaningful is to expose cadavers to standardized amounts of blast and to see in autopsy, what are there broken bones? Nobody's being blown into pieces. They're getting jarred by a blast underneath. But they were shut down by people. So someone at the Pentagon felt that their personal ethics were offended, and it was such a to me the level of concern about dead people seemed so out of proportion with the level of concern for people who were essentially being crippled by having been in a vehicle that was thrown in the air, flipped over 3 times, and landed. And that's where the concern should be with those individuals who are still alive.
Right.
And,
excellent point.
Yeah. So that was just a strange little bit of thinking there. But anyway, yeah, people are uncomfortable with cadavers and with death and with the issue of respect. But if somebody has made themselves available as a dead body for research, part of respecting their wishes is making good use of them, and that is a very good use. But people are uncomfortable with it. Anyway, that was fascinating. That was a really interesting part of it.
Yeah.
And people can learn a lot about that from reading Stiff. Would be a good place to start. It's a new respect for all of the things that those corpses do.
Yes.
Speaking of that, like sort of cycling back to your other books, like do you find you have new audiences every time you write a new book and then they go back and read your other ones?
Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully they go back and purchase every single one.
As they should. But I just didn't know if you got some emails or the publisher received some feedback that said...
Well, definitely every time you put out a new book, the publisher sees a jump in your past works, which is partly why they're excited for you to put out a new book. Because then
I'm happy you're with Norton because Norton's been a good publisher for you.
Yes, they're great. They are a wonderful company and a really just terrific group of people.
Right, and I'm sure they don't want to lose you.
I think we've almost answered this question now, but when I was nearly finished the book, I wrote a question to myself that says, what keeps Mary's books from being superficial and juvenile? And it could so easily devolve into that, but it doesn't. And I think we've discussed a lot of those reasons, and I think we talked about this on episode 1. It's like, do you have any new insights, anything you want to add to how you do it so that it's not puerile and sophomoric?
Well, I think that, I choose topics that are normally treated in a puerile or however you pronounce that way, sophomoric way. But what I like about those topics is that people tend to think, oh, this is going to be immature, silly and gross. And I like them, and then I like them to see that in fact it's really actually interesting and sometimes important. And so it's a whole side to these topics that are either taboo or they seem stupid and gross and immature. It's kind of it's an interesting twist. I hope that they're able to see that they're.
Yeah.
I'm not just cracking jokes.
Well, you're not doing it for the gross out. I think it's a more iconoclastic view of these are taboo subjects, and we don't do ourselves any favors by pretending they don't exist. It's better to learn about them.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. And because people typically just turn away, that keeps the material fresh for me. Nobody else wants to cover it. I'll do it.
That's true. And while you were on your little internet break, we were talking about how everything you do has something to do with the human body.
Yes.
Yeah, because we're the most interesting things on the planet. To ourselves.
Yeah, to ourselves. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, that's the secret to my success.
We like ourselves.
Okay, now I want an answer to a couple things. One is, you gave us the story, and I was amazed by how it is that beaded curtains came about, and I want to know if they actually do what is claimed for them.
Sure. Well, they're called fly curtains. And the idea is not to make your pad look cool. The original idea, the beaded curtain is used in the Middle East, at least traditionally, as a way of letting the breezes come through the doorway, but not the flies. Mm-hmm. So, if being careful and watching, the fly could come in too, but it definitely puts up a barrier and makes the flies transit more difficult. Mm. So I don't know how foolproof the fly curtain is, but it certainly keeps them, for the most part, out of the room. I haven't actually tested a fly. I haven't tested a beaded curtain against flies, so I can't give you an answer from personal experience, but that I found that fascinating. Because I used to have one of those, and I had no idea that was its provenance.
Yes, it was just, make your pad look cool, as you said.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Lightning round question. What do the words chairborne ranger, pogus, and scientist have in common?
Chairborne ranger, pogue, and scientist, well, these were all, a chairborne ranger and a pogue are pretty much the same. They are kind of a dismissive term for somebody who sits in an air-conditioned office somewhere other than on the front lines or in the action. So in other words, it's somebody making decisions, a chairborne ranger, somebody who's making decisions or giving orders from the comfort of a desk. And a pogue is just an outsider. My understanding, like I'm a pogue or a media puke.
Yes.
And there are people that I spoke to who there was one person specifically, one guy who lumped scientists in there too, because his feeling was we are the ones on the mission. Every mission is different. You can't give us a formula as how much water we need to bring based on your sweat prediction formula. Don't tell us because we're here and we know what we need and what to do. So there's a little bit of distance and misunderstanding, I think, between terms of the people who are out doing the grunt work and the people in the air-conditioned offices and labs.
Okay, she said grunt work. That's
as she should. As she should. So actually, let's just heap some praise upon the military and how cooperative and wonderful they were for you, Mary. So
they were. People were incredibly generous with their time and also with helping me to set some of these things up that weren't necessarily easy to set up. So yeah, they were. They were pretty great.
that someone would take you to a firing range, so you could put on all this gear, and learn what it takes to protect your hearing. I was just amazed that they go to those lengths to help you really experience this.
Well, I was tagging along with a group of military audiologists, so that one wasn't set up for me. It was just me butting in on the military audiologists and their session out at Camp Pendleton. But nonetheless, it was nice of them to allow me to tag along and get in the way in my usual way.
Are there pictures of you out there in all the gear?
I think there is one. There is one picture somewhere. Yeah, somebody sent me a picture with all the gear.
Good. I want to see it. I'll comb the internet.
I'll try to dig it up.
Because I think it'll be it'd be great, because you're not a giant person like a giant Marine. You're a small woman who and they get to dress you up and. So, did you eat a lot of interesting military food?
No, very little, because I don't have a chapter on that, because a lot of it was sort of similar to what I covered in Packing for Mars.
Okay.
And
MREs.
it's a lot of extremely long shelf life, and making food specific to a mission. So. No, I don't. I tried a caffeinated meat stick, which I can't really.
Oh, wow.
I can't really recommend as a snack, but a lot of people like them. So.
Wow, interesting. Well, you know what? We are down to 2 minutes left. And Mary, is there anything else we didn't ask you that you would like to mention to our viewers?
No. This was great. This was great.
Yeah, I have to say, folks, if you thought this information was interesting, there's so much more of it in her book, Grunt, which was great. It took me no time at all to read this, because it's just like one interesting thing after another, as all your books are. And, I just kept reading quickly. I do read fast in general, but, when I can't put it down, that's the better indicator. So. And of course, it's full of footnotes, as they usually are.
Particularly entertaining footnotes. I didn't get to ask about burning pantyhose, but that's in there. And of course, there's the reimbursement number for medical equipment. Yeah. But I think, Mary, I enjoyed your first book an awful lot, and I think you're getting better.
Oh, thank you so much.
They're good. The amazing thing is there's still more you can discover. I assume somewhere you have ideas for the next book?
Yeah. I don't have the idea, but I'm mulling over some things. We'll see. Yeah. Hopefully, I'll come up with something else. Otherwise, what will I do? I'm not trained to do anything else. So.
This is true. Okay, so everybody who tuned in, and everyone, thank you for your patience with the internet interruptions. These things happen. But if you have not read Mary Roach's book, Grunt, go ahead and read it. I'm sure we've given you a lot of tidbits from the book that should pique your interest and send you on your way right directly to Amazon or the bookstore or wherever you like to buy your books. So, Mary, thank you so much. It's always a delight to talk to you. And
thank you so much, Joanne and Jeff. So fun always to hang out with you. Sorry, my internet speed is not up to snuff or something.
Well, it's okay. We appreciate your patience with that, because it's frustrating for the guest, I think, more so than me.
So we deal with fine. Thank you so much.
Thanks, you, Mary. Thank you, and thank you to everybody who tuned in today.